Welcome to the Global Societies podcast, recorded for the Global Square Magazine in association with the Global Societies Journal.
My name is Rachel Enders.
I'm Dylan Lambert-Gillum.
And I'm Dr. Nadege Clitandre.
She's our guest of honor today. So, as we start asking questions, we're going to follow this format a little bit. First, we're going to talk about the main focus of your work, specifically with Edwidge Danticat and humanitarian work that you've led in Haiti, student trips that you've made there. Then we're going to go into what classes you teach here at UCSB, and finally wrap it up with some general career questions and advice that you might have.
Okay.
All right, let's start with our questions.
What sparked your interest in studying the works of Edwidge Danticat?
When I was an English major at Hampton University, I was focusing on issues of migration and questions around identity. And Edwidge Danticat was the only writer who focused on what it meant to be a Haitian American in the United States. And being that I am also Haitian American, I thought this was a great way to work through my own understanding of what it means to be an immigrant through the gaze of Danticat's work.
All right. So you mentioned that you went to Hampton University. You also have several master's degree and a PhD. Do you mind giving...
Just 2 masters.
Just 2?
Several.
So what were your masters in?
My degree was in English literature at Hampton University. That's where I received my BA. Mm-hmm. My MA was at the University of Chicago. I didn't go for a second master's, but when I started the PhD at UC Berkeley, I had to get a master's before getting the PhD. So that's why I have 2 masters.
Okay. And your PhD was in the...
African Diaspora Studies.
African Diaspora Studies.
Mm-hmm.
Really, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's cool. All right, so our second question deals specifically with one of the articles that you've written. So... in your essay, Mapping the Echo Chamber, Edwidge Danticat and the Thematic Trilogy of Birth, Separation, and Death, you write that the prototypical migratory subject in a large part of Haitian literature during the 20th century has been male, and that women in traditional Haitian literature exist as peripheral characters. You go on to write in your semi-autobiographical novel... Oh, that in Edwidge Danticat's semi-autobiographical novel, Breath, Eyes, Memory, Danticat draws on her experience to critique these patriarchal norms. In what ways does Danticat do this?
So in the early part of the 20th century, a lot of the classical writings in Haiti focused on the male hero. So a lot of the novels dealt with individuals who were dealing with the experience of exile or dealing with the experience of political changes, revolutionary changes. But all of this was through the perspective of male experiences. It's not to say that the women weren't writing at the time, it's just that they weren't being highlighted. So much of the classical writings during the early part of that period were coming from male writers and about male experiences. It wasn't until around the 50s and 60s with the work of a writer called Marie Chauvet that the women really highlighted their own individual experiences and talked about the same issues but from the interior lives of what it meant to be a woman.
Okay.
So that's one of the reasons why I say that in that article. And of course, with Danticat's work, her first novel, she's dealing with what it means for her to be a young woman developing identity in the United States. And of course, this is from a perspective of a young woman. So there are a lot of issues that come up around gender, around sexuality that she talks about. And she also highlights the experiences of her family members who played an important role in her life, and they are also women.
Okay. So would you say that there's one specific thing that sets apart the women's perspective and the male perspective?
I think one thing that was made clear when the women writers started to talk about similar issues, the thing that was different is that instead of a more objective view of these experiences, the women went really deeper into their interior lives.
Okay.
And it wasn't just about talking about politics, but how do, for example, politics impact what it means to be a woman, what it means to engage in family dynamics. So that is slightly different from the classical text that really idealized the experience and promoted a certain kind of political agenda.
Mm-hmm. So instead of just focusing on the political, they really show the effects of politics on daily life.
Exactly.
That's so important.
Exactly.
Okay. Let's move on to our next question.
So you write that one element in Danticat's writing is a search for home, part of which is also a search for her literary ancestors. And you discuss this element of her writing during the section of your essay, your most recent essay, dealing with the theme of separation. How do these topics relate to the theme of separation?
Yeah, that's a very good question. The search for home actually comes out of family members being separated. And of course, it also comes out from an individual migrating to another country. So it's actually the experience of migration that engenders this desire for home. Because you don't really think about home when you're at home.
Yeah.
You only think about it when you're away. And so it's the experience of being away that actually creates this desire for home. And the search for home also means a kind of retrieval back to the past, or a reconnection to family members, or to the things that you remember from your childhood. And so that's why the theme of separation is so key. It was certainly important in Danticat's first novel, because in the novel, the protagonist is thinking through her identity, but at the same time remembering home because of some of the experiences, negative experiences that she faced in the U.S. So it's that experience that engenders this kind of desire for home, and sometimes it's also an idealization of the home because of the experiences that one faces outside of it.
Okay. We have a follow-up question relating to the political structure that caused a lot of the separation, I guess. So our question is, how do these themes relate to the Duvalier dictatorship? And I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right.
Duvalier, yeah.
Duvalier.
Yeah.
It's a French
You did
name?
a good job.
Yeah.
François
Okay.
Duvalier.
Okay.
It is a French name. That is also a really good question. In the 50s and 60s, under the Duvalier dictatorship, a lot of people either disappeared or went to jail or were exiled. So one of the things about the theme of separation is the separation of these individuals from their family members because of the disappearance, or because of individuals going to jail, or because they were forced into exile. So that theme was very prevalent from the 50s on, because so many people were migrating outside of Haiti as a result of the political suppression at the time. And this also led to economic instability, and because of that, a number of individuals just fled the country. So this caused that kind of separation among family members. And of course, it also created a kind of politicized separation that made people idealize the home. So a number of people who were exiled, because they left involuntarily, they weren't fully engaged in outside of the country. And so a lot of them just try to remember home and try to understand what it means to reconnect in some other fashion.
They weren't ready to leave, so it's natural that they were trying to remember and look back on what they had to leave behind.
Right.
Yeah, that's sad.
Right. And a number of these individuals self-identified as being in exile as opposed to being a part of the diaspora.
Wow.
So in the title of your most recent article, and within it, you use the term echo chamber. In what ways does Danticat act as an echo chamber in her writing?
Yeah, this is part of the title of my book on Edwidge Danticat. Danticat has a book of a collection of stories called Create Dangerously. And in that book, she says at some point, I think towards the end of the book, maybe I'm an echo chamber, kind of collecting all of these stories and voices of individuals. And I found that really fascinating, and for some reason, it pushed me to try to figure out, is she the only person who has used that phrase, or if others in the past have? And I found out that other writers in the 50s, use that phrase as well to talk about the experience of writing and what it means to write in a way that is connected to the voices that are, kind of being processed as one writes these stories and these characters into being. And so that's why I, honed in on this phrase, the echo chamber. In many ways, it's a way of thinking about the writing process that relates to different voices. What's funny is that in the modern context, a lot of people are using the echo chamber now, but they're using it to talk about the repetition of ideas. I think in the media, a lot of people are saying, oh, that sounds like an echo chamber. It's a way to say that you're repeating the same things. You're part of the kind of same political...
Established.
There's no new ideas.
Exactly. So if you're a Republican, then you're part of this kind of Republican echo chamber. If you're a Democrat, you're part of this echo chamber. And you're not really listening to different voices. Yeah. My understanding of echo chamber through Danticat and through the other writers who use it seems to be quite different. So instead of thinking about it in terms of like a homogeneous way of thinking about an idea, the different kinds of voices bring in a heterogeneous understanding of what it means to think about these ideas.
Like echoing voices that would not be heard.
Exactly. And echoing it to the point where they are magnified, right?
Well, we're going to take a brief break here, but first I'd like to plug your upcoming book, Globalizing the Echo Chamber, Edwidge Danticat and Haitian Diasporic Imaginary. Is going to be coming out soon.
Right, with the University of Virginia Press.
Okay. Well, do you want to say anything on the book at all, or?
No, not yet.
Welcome back.
Alrighty, so jumping right into it, Haiti is obviously important to your work. Not only is it central to Danticat's writing, you've also led several trips there, bringing students, as well as previous trips on your own and with other universities as well. We're going to discuss a student trip in a moment.
As well as being from there.
Yeah, as well as being from there. We'll discuss the student trip in a moment, but before we get to that, let's take a moment to discuss the 2010 earthquake. Well, first of all, I want to commend you because before the earthquake even, you had already started your work there. Mm-hmm. So, you were already helping Haiti before it was cool, so to speak. Can you tell us a little bit about the community library that you established with your father and how the earthquake affected it?
Yeah. You know, I left Haiti when I was 7. So my first return wasn't until after I completed my master's degree. So I was already in my mid-20s. And when I returned, I ended up spending a year teaching English there. It was actually that experience that led me to continue on to the PhD program. Because after that, I wasn't sure I wanted to further the graduate study. But I had such a profound experience being in Haiti and kind of reconnecting on a personal level, and also reconnecting with my father, who had returned
it's a long
in
chunk
the
of
90s.
time.
Yeah. So there was the kind of separation from the homeland, and then there was the separation from my father. And it was that experience that reconnected me to the country in a number of ways. And after that initial return, I just kept returning on an annual basis. And I always wanted to do something for the young people in the community. One of the things that I learned from teaching English in Haiti to students who were in their 20s is that there was such a desire and thirst for knowledge. And I didn't realize how much of a lack there was in terms of that kind of desire. And so a number of the students talked about wanting to have access to books and wanting to further their education. And that was new to me because in the United States I had all these privileges and I had access to go to school. I didn't find any restrictions in any kind of way. If I wanted it, I went for it. But that wasn't the case for a number of young Haitians who were about my age. And then in the community where I grew up, I talked to my father about this. And then one summer, I think this was the summer of 2005, we were having a conversation, and then we started talking about access to books and libraries. He's a journalist and a novelist, and I'm a scholar of literature, so we had that in common. And then he said, well, why don't we transform the family home into a library? And, being young as I was like, oh, of course, that sounds fantastic. Let's do it. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. So we started developing a library, and we were doing this while I was in the PhD program at Berkeley. And so we started by just trying to get individuals to donate books, and then over time it just developed into this big thing.
So the donations of books, were you collecting them in the U.S. and then sending them to Haiti?
We were.
Okay.
We were getting a lot of donations of English books, and we were getting also donations of French books. We had to try to minimize the English books because just sending books to Haiti were extremely expensive. And
Books
of
are
course,
heavy.
I didn't know all of this, right? And then this led to looking into what it meant to actually start a nonprofit, because at the time I didn't know what a 501c3 was, so I had to do that kind of research if I wanted donations and individuals wanted to get the tax write-off. So that's how it became this, big thing in the end. But in the beginning, it was just like, hey, let's give the young folks some access to books. But it was a challenging experience and a learning experience too.
I love your enthusiasm for it, and even despite the hard things that you faced during the process, you still talk about it with such love. Like, it's your project, you work so hard on it, it's your baby.
The first couple of years was challenging, but it was also meaningful, because when you see that the young, and it wasn't just the young individuals, it was also the residents in the community, their parents, their family members, they really saw the library as an oasis. An oasis that kept them away from their own kind of challenging lifestyles at home. Of course, students who have access to books, that gives them an escape, to some other experience that they may not have in Haiti. So that was very meaningful. And then right before the earthquake in 2009, we got a big grant from a nonprofit organization in California. Actually, it was a family organization in the Bay Area. And that foundation gave us some funding to actually create a computer lab.
Oh,
And
wow.
you should have seen the faces of the people in the community when we said that we were going to have a computer lab. So in December, I went to Haiti to supervise the construction of the computer lab, and I was there the entire month, and we completed the computer lab the Thursday before the earthquake. So there was, the earthquake happened on a Tuesday, and the computer lab was completed on the Thursday before, and we were so excited. We had just celebrated the new year, and we felt like we were going to go really, really far. And of course, the earthquake hit. I left the Thursday before the earthquake, so I was there the entire month of Haiti. And imagine the following week, I'm watching, what's going on here in California, having just been there a few days prior. And of course, the library was destroyed beyond repair, and we had to deal with that.
It's horrible.
The good news is no one was at the library during the time. My father was there, but he was the only one there. He survived, but imagine if we had all those students, those young people at the library, that would have been devastating.
That's
Yeah.
a heavy topic. That's
Yeah,
so sad.
yeah.
Fortunately, not much relief. That's the next question. So we wanted to, going on further with the earthquake, how does it affected your research personally, and in a broader sense, how has it affected Haitian academics?
Yeah, when the earthquake happened, I had just completed the PhD. So I completed the PhD, I think, the summer of 2009. And I said, okay, I need to be brain dead for like a few months just to get back into the groove of things. And so when January hit, that's when I was just starting to, think about what's next. I had a postdoc, the UC President's postdoc at the time. I had just started the postdoc and wanted to focus on my writing and publishing a couple of articles and thinking about the book project. Of course, that was challenging to do because there was so much going on the ground. And in many ways, and this wasn't just me, this was, I think, most of the Haitian scholars in the U.S. and elsewhere, we were feeling a sense of guilt because we felt like we needed to do something. So many of us had to reroute and do a lot of on-the-ground work at the time. Claudine Michel, who's in the Department of Black Studies and the Center for Black Studies, and I really used the Center for Black Studies research as a kind of hub for individuals who really wanted to do relief work. And we worked really hard at connecting with other individuals in the UC system who had a desire to help. And I think we spent about 2 or 3 years just really trying to get resources for Haiti in any way possible. We also worked with Direct Relief International, who was so supportive and gave a lot of grants that we supervised through the Center for Black Studies Research. And so, some of that was really meaningful, but the experience was hard because we were trying to work through the guilt of not being there, and also making as much time as possible to really focus on the ground's work that would really offer relief to individuals who were in need at the time. We're talking about immediate relief.
Right.
And that's not easy to do as an academic.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a big reprioritizing that had to happen.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I hope you don't feel guilt still, because all of your efforts to help mitigate afterwards, definitely you've done everything you can, really, at this point.
It's a process.
And you've
It's a
helped
process.
UCSB students be able to become involved, I'm sure.
Yeah. That was also a challenge.
Okay, so our next question is about these students. So we're going to talk about the student trip. How did this trip get started, and what would you say the benefits for UCSB students and the community?
So the trip happened in the summer of 2015, but it took 2 years of preparation before we got to that point. And it began with an initial grant from the Orphala Center and additional support from the Center for Black Studies Research. So there were two things that we wanted to make sure happened before the students got to Haiti. First, that they would take my Haiti course and get a sense of the country's history, culture. I needed the students to be prepared and go to Haiti with some knowledge, as opposed to just going there without that kind of background.
Right.
And second, that the students would meet with us on a weekly basis to talk about what we wanted to do and create a kind of itinerary for the trip, and deal with some sensitive topics before we actually got to Haiti. Of course, this didn't prevent them from having challenging experience in Haiti, but I think it did help with understanding what it is they were going through while they were there.
Yeah, preparation is always important, for sure.
So, talking about the class that you've taught, what might students curious about taking your class? It's being offered this quarter, right?
Yeah. I'm teaching it now. The class, the size of the class is usually about 35 to 40 students, so it's kind of like a seminar-style class. It's funny because when I started teaching, I remember one student came up to me and said, well, what are we going to teach? What are you going to teach in 10 weeks? What is there to talk about? And then at the end of the course, that same student came to me and said, wow, we just really scratched the surface here. So I didn't know what students expected when I started teaching the class. I know there was interest because of the earthquake, and everyone was talking about Haiti at the time, and a number of those students actually didn't even know where Haiti was until the earthquake hit. So I don't think I had any expectations, and I don't think the students had any expectations then. But over time, I think what the students found interesting about the course, and that they would share with other students, is this kind of case focus. So most of the students were just very happy that they were focusing on one particular area for the 10 weeks that dealt with issues around humanitarian aid, nonprofit work. And what the students are often surprised about is the complexity of humanitarian aid. There's this idea that we're doing good because we want to do good, but the students don't always think about what it means to be a nonprofit but act like a business, or what it means to do work but really have to get funding for it, and the limitations of that funding, and also the negative impact of being in a country that depends on nonprofit organizations and humanitarian aid. So that's one of the things that they often find quite surprising.
So our next question. So do we address this already?
I think we can do it again.
So the question is, at what point did you know you wanted to pursue a career researching literature in Haiti?
I'm not sure. When I started doing this research as an undergraduate student, it just kept going, and it just never stopped. There was always something to learn, not just about Haiti. I use Haiti as this kind of case example, but the broader issues for me were about migration, displacement, what it means to be an other, what it means to feel like an outsider. How do individuals who come to a place like the United States have to rethink their identity because of the experience of being an immigrant? So those were the broad issues that I really wanted to focus on, and Haiti just happened to be, I think, the example that I used to think about these larger issues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely a good case study to exemplify those things.
Well,
for sure.
yeah, there's a lot there.
Mm-hmm.
So, basically, our second to final question, we just wanted to ask, have you had any jobs or experiences that weren't, strictly speaking, academic or in the field of academics that helped propel your research interests or your decision to go into research?
That's a funny question. I can't even remember what I did before academia. I don't think so. I think that all of the jobs in some way were connected to those larger interests that I mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I had jobs when I was younger, working for Radio Shack or at a local newspaper. But at the time, I didn't think about those jobs in relation to the broader interest. Mm-hmm. And then when I started my undergraduate degree at Hampton University, I already felt like I was going to focus on something for a long time. So anything that I did was, from that point on, was always related to the research. Even the summer jobs, I think, were somehow connected to some kind of fellowship or program or academic program of some sort. So, and it just kind of went on from there.
Well, my takeaway is, students, if you're working for Radio Shack, you become a successful academic stuff.
Well, they wanted me to manage the store. And I said, no, I'm just doing this for the summer.
That's funny. I think when you talked about teaching English as a second language in Haiti, I think that's pretty academic, but maybe not exactly geared where your academic research has been. And I think that also kind of, you were saying that it influenced you to want to come back.
Even that experience for me felt like it was very related to the work that I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think about it as something that is separate from my academic trajectory.
Awesome. All right, then our final question for you is, what advice would you give students who are seeking a career in global studies?
That's a good one. I have students who come to my office hours every quarter, and they really come in the spring, early part of the spring, and they are in a frenzy because they're not clear on what's going to happen after graduation. There are a few students who are very clear. Mm-hmm. And those students, all I have to do is write a recommendation for them because they know exactly what they want to do. They're pursuing graduate school, a master's or a PhD. But most students are a bit up in the air. And what I tell them is it's okay if you don't have a specific direction. But what you need to do is make sure that you create the opportunities, right? So try to figure out 3 or 4 things that are possible. A couple of graduate applications. Perhaps you're interested in pursuing a career, then get some applications out there. But what I try to tell students is just make sure that you create the opportunities as opposed to feeling like you don't have a specific direction. Because it's okay. And in the end, it's a journey.
I'm scared, so this is so relevant. I'm like, yes, thank you.
It's true because in the end, it's a journey. You know, I have friends who are not academics, and I think there are some who know exactly what their lives are going to be in 5 years. Mm-hmm. I have never been able to do that. For me, it's always been making sure that I have the opportunities so I know what's next and not necessarily think about what my life is going to be in 10, 15, 20 years. Mm-hmm. Because you have to get excited about the journey. The journey is going to take you in all different directions. You know, when I was in undergrad, I didn't even know what a PhD was. So, it's true. Yeah. It's true. Wow. You have to be open to the possibilities of what life brings you.
Thank you for your optimism.
That is the advice that I give to all my students.
Okay.
All right. Well, we're ready to sign off.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for doing this. These were wonderful questions. I was very impressed.
Well, that's very relieving for us to hear.
You guys did your homework.
All right. Well, we're all off to our own journeys then. All right. This has been the Global Societies podcast.